RTV বিশ্ব সংস্কৃতিতে আবহমান বাংলার এক মমতাময় চিত্রকর।
দর্শক, আমন্ত্রণ আন্তর্জাতিক সম্পর্ক উন্নয়ন বিষয়ক RTV নিয়মিত অনুষ্ঠান ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোনে। আপনাদের সঙ্গে আছে আমি সৈয়দ আশিক রহমান। আমাদের আজকের অতিথি UNAIDS এর কান্ট্রি ডিরেক্টর মিস্টার লিও কেনি। লিও কেনি টু RTV স্টুডিও।
Thank you very much, Ashik. I appreciate being here, and I think it's the third time I've been here, so we really
It's our pleasure to find you here. It is, you are telling, third time. Great. So, Mr. Leo, you have passed your 2 years as a country representative of UNAIDS to Bangladesh. Would you please share your experience so far?
Yes, I think in the 3 years that I've been here, I've seen a real commitment by the government of Bangladesh and by civil society to try to see what we can do to get Bangladesh away from being just one of the few countries in the region where the epidemic is still increasing. So we have some challenges ahead, but I think that the commitment by the government, right from the minister and from the prime minister down, I believe that we're going to make some progress, significant progress in the next few years on this.
Great. What are the key messages for World AIDS Day this year?
For World AIDS Day, everybody is encouraged to think about the long-term future of ending AIDS. And to end AIDS, this year, the World AIDS Day theme is making sure that we bridge the gap, close the gap. Now, what do we mean by the gap? I would say in Bangladesh, the real gap that we're facing is that we are only detecting 1/3 of the estimated number of people who are living with HIV. So what we find then is that we've detected around 3,250 cases. We estimate that there's probably around 9,500 HIV positive people. Now, if you can't find and if you can't test and detect these cases, then you can't treat people. And that's where we've seen great declines in the epidemic in other parts of the world, because you increase the number of people on treatment and you use treatment as prevention. But if we can't detect more than 1/3, then it's very difficult to treat them. Yeah. But we have some ideas on how to double the number of people on treatment by next year.
Well, as UNAID country director, how do you feel about Bangladesh's response for HIV and AIDS?
I think that one of the biggest problems in the world is that is really halting people's access to HIV services has been stigma and discrimination. Now, what I've seen by Bangladesh civil society and the commitment by the government is very encouraging. The Bangladesh response started early, and very early on they addressed some of the key populations where we saw the epidemic was coming from. And they are sex workers, transgender, hijra, men who have sex with men. And now these groups of people in many countries are highly stigmatized. Now, I'm not saying they're not stigmatized here, but I think that the Bangladesh society, even the religious leaders and government, are right behind efforts to break down these stigma and discrimination barriers. When you break those down, you find more people come to be tested. I think a landmark decision at the beginning of this year was recognition of hijra as a third sex.
Exactly.
And so we've seen some very good progress in that regard. But we still have a lot to do in working out how to, I said before actually doubling the number of people on treatment, I meant doubling the number of people we test.
Well,
and because if you can do that, Bangladesh has a very good record. Bangladesh offers free, confidential, antiretroviral treatment and other care and support services to almost everybody who needs it. But if, as I say, you can't detect everybody, then you can't offer treatment. But we have some ideas about how to scale the access to treatment, how to scale that up. And I'd be happy to give you a few ideas about that if you like.
Well, Leo, do you think that we are in right track, create awareness?
We are. I think there's, really burgeoning awareness. There's always much more room, particularly with young people. Some of the knowledge amongst young people is some of the worst in the region for Bangladesh. And we must improve life skills-based education that includes HIV education in schools, and it needs to be systematically taught. But more than that, I think, not more than that, but alongside of that, we need to be increasing the number of people who come and get tested. Now, some of the ways that we can do that is by looking at new technologies. Some of the new technologies available are saliva-based testing or using whole blood. Now, this doesn't replace the normal algorithms that have been established, that have been based on WHO and UNAIDS guidelines and have been endorsed by the government. It doesn't exclude those, but what it does is it gets more people to come into the testing program. And I think we also need to be looking at how we're using maternal and child health services and other sexual reproductive health services, how we're using the TB program.
Would you please tell us about the current number of HIV?
Globally, we have seen a decline in the number of new infections in some of the highest burden countries, including sub-Saharan Africa. Since 2001, we've seen a decline of around up to 50% in some countries.
50%?
But in Bangladesh, we haven't seen any of that. And since 2001, we've seen a 25% increase in new infections.
Increase?
An increase.
In Bangladesh?
What's happening now, I think you'll find in Bangladesh, is the new infections data will be released on World AIDS Day. What we would expect is not to see a significant decline. We hope that there is some, at least, leveling off.
Leveling, yeah.
Because what we find in Asia Pacific is that whilst there's been this decline in new infections, in the last 3 or 4 years, there has been no decline. It's the graph has come like this and then it's leveled off.
Well.
Now, we've seen a decline in the number of deaths. That's because there's more people on treatment.
Well, what are co-agencies' role in the response?
You know, UNAIDS is a secretariat, and we are a secretariat for 11 entities of the UN. The newest one is UN Women, so you can understand that we think that gender and addressing sexual violence, gender equality, these are very important things. And then there are 10 other co-sponsoring organizations, UNDP, UNICEF, WHO, etc., etc. So we have a joint team here. It's called the Joint Team on AIDS. And our work is predominantly to do several things. To make sure that we have a good, sound evidence base.
Yeah.
For making sure that we know our epidemic, and to really provide some technical support for making sure that that's in place. Our real purpose is to make sure that there's that we're providing support to the government of Bangladesh and to civil society, and building those partnerships to make sure there's a decent response. and of course to ensure that there's enough resources in place. So we work very closely with the donors and with the Global Fund on AIDS, TB, malaria to mobilise the resources and to see how they're being used and to advocate. I think, you know, I was just thanking you very much for being on this program before, but I think the mass media has a very important role.
Actually, it's our pleasure to find you here. And Mr. Dio, we'll talk more after a short break. দর্শক দেখছেন আন্তর্জাতিক সম্পর্ক উন্নয়ন বিষয়ক আরটিভির নিয়মিত অনুষ্ঠান ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোন। এই পর্যায়ে নিচ্ছি বিরতি, ফিরছি একটু পরেই। সে পর্যন্ত আমাদের সাথেই থাকুন। দর্শক আবারও আমন্ত্রণ আন্তর্জাতিক সম্পর্ক উন্নয়ন বিষয়ক আরটিভির নিয়মিত অনুষ্ঠান ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোনে। কথা বলছিলাম UNAIDS এর কান্ট্রি ডিরেক্টর মিস্টার লিও কেনির সঙ্গে। ওয়েলকাম এগেইন অ্যাট RTV স্টুডিও।
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Leo, in your view, what key challenges are still remaining in the response area?
You know, around World AIDS Day, we have talked about a fast track approach to ending AIDS by 2030.
Well,
We believe that if we can implement a number of measures, that it is possible to end AIDS as we know it. You may remember there was a slogan, zero discrimination, zero AIDS-related deaths, etc. Now that has
there is 3 zeros.
the 3 zeros. Now that has not gone out the window. What we're looking at now is, what does that mean? They were always aspirational goals. The reason I'm explaining this is because these are the challenges that we have in Bangladesh. We set ourselves a target of 90-90-90, getting 90% of people who are HIV positive. That means 90% of the people out there know their state. You know, do you know in Bangladesh 2/3 of the people living with HIV don't know it?
It is not well known.
Well, it's what is a well-known fact is that you know, throughout the world, globally, there are more people who don't know they're HIV positive than know they're HIV positive. So the first thing is to make sure that people know their status. And what does that mean? It means go and get a test. If you've come into contact with blood or had unprotected sex, get a test, because then you can be treated and live a normal life. So that's the first thing. That's the challenge in Bangladesh. Overcome the stigma and discrimination so that people get tested. Whoever they are, whatever they do, they need to have confidential testing.
Well, UNAIDS has launched new report ahead of World AIDS Day. Fast track ending the AIDS epidemic by 2030.
Yeah.
Can you please give an insight on that?
Yes. Well, when you were talking the challenges, that's what I was outlining about the 90-90-90. So it means that if you want to end AIDS by 2030, we try to get 90% of people to know their status, and then the people who know their status get 90% of them on antiretroviral treatment, and then the third 90 is keeping them on antiretroviral treatment, because that's a big problem. People leave treatment and the virus will return to the blood. So it's called viral suppression, meaning that the treatment is working. So the first 90 is making sure that people know their status, get them on treatment and keep them on treatment. In that way, if we can reach those targets, we believe that we effectively end AIDS.
Then what do you mean by ending the AIDS?
That's effectively what we mean. That if everybody gets detected and treated, then you can end AIDS.
The National AIDS Committee, are they doing right thing?
Yes, I think, you know, particularly the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, very good leadership from the Minister, from the Secretary and the additional secretaries, and right down through there. I think what's been very encouraging over the last year, We've had a lot of support from donors, particularly USAID, to help us restructure the governance in the AIDS response as it applies to the Global Fund on AIDS, TB, and Malaria. So, I think that the national STI and HIV program itself needs to be further strengthened, but I think the Ministry of Health is doing, a very good job in leadership of the response. So I don't think I think one thing that's going to be very important in the post-2015 agenda, you're going to find that there's going to be much less money for, I don't think in the post-2015 agenda you will find an MDG like 6, which is halt and reverse HIV. It'll be much broader. There's going to be less resources. There already are less resources. And I think the Global Fund on AIDS, TB and Malaria will not be in the same form it is at the moment. So I think another big challenge for the government of Bangladesh
Big challenges.
You need to, I think the government of Bangladesh is going to have to find many more of its own resources for HIV/AIDS.
Own resources.
Own resources.
How UNAIDS can play a role with media so that no negative news are published?
I think the media in Bangladesh already does a fantastic job. I must say that, and I've been in 20, 30 different countries, and I'm very impressed with the media in Bangladesh, and I hope that they continue to be able to play a role in the dissemination of correct information. I mean, this kind of program tonight I think is very good, but I've seen print media, having round tables where it brings policymakers together with technical people and UN agencies and civil society, and have done a particularly good job. Just recently, the Hijra Pride Festival, very good press coverage. In fact, that was so successful that we noticed the other day, Bandhu Society sent me a whole load of links to the press coverage. Now, it was very well covered in a very constructive way in Bangladesh, in print and in electronic media. But then I saw that it was also very well covered by...
And there is a hope.
But in Europe, in Australia, this reached out. I think it caught people's imagination. Yes. Bangladesh is a very progressive, liberal society, maybe even more so than Australia, where I come from.
Yes, hope for the best. Well, now we know that Bangladesh is going to organize ICAP in 2050. How Bangladesh HIV and AIDS response would be benefited by it?
I think not just the AIDS response, but I think it will benefit Bangladesh tremendously. Sheikh Hasina, the Honourable Prime Minister, has sent a message at the last ICAP, which is the International Congress on AIDS in Asia Pacific, and she in Bangkok has sent a message saying, "We welcome you to Bangladesh in November 2014. We expect between 3,000 and 4,000 people to come here in November next year.
Next year.
So we only have 1 year to organize this. I mean, as well as a scientific conference, the conference itself is really about the communities, community engagement. This is the first time that a government has ever co-hosted. Usually it's been hosted by big NGOs. And, we expect to see a range of benefits for Bangladesh. We really hope that, for example, pharmaceutical companies will come and that we will talk about generic manufacturing of drugs and trade agreements. And we hope to have, that's just an example. There'll be cultural tracks, there'll be community tracks. We'll try to convene the Global Fund countries here at the same time. So we hope to see a range of events over a 4-day period, And I think there's many opportunities that are not just related to HIV/AIDS. I think across the whole health spectrum, there will be, for example, national human rights commissions will be convened around that time. We hope to see a convening really of for example, parliamentarians against, who are working on putting an end to sexual violence against women and girls. So there's a whole range of human rights issues,
Exactly.
scientific issues, commercial issues, and cultural issues. So it's a great opportunity for Bangladesh.
Mr. Leo, we are almost end of the program. Where would you like to see Bangladesh after 10 years?
After 10 years, so now we are in 2015, I would like to see you very close to the 2030 goal of ending AIDS. And I think you can do that in this country.
Well, thank you very much indeed being with us. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Ashik.
দর্শক, বাংলাদেশে প্রতি বছর এইডস রোগীর সংখ্যা বৃদ্ধি পাচ্ছে। একমাত্র সচেতনতাই পারে এর বিস্তার রোধ করতে। UNAIDS-এর মতো প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলোর সহযোগিতায় সেটিও সম্ভব। এছাড়া অন্যান্য সহযোগী প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলো সচেতনতা বৃদ্ধির পাশাপাশি চিকিৎসা সেবা নিশ্চিতে তাদের কার্যক্রম অব্যাহত রাখবে। এই প্রত্যাশা শেষ করছি আজকের ডিপ্লোম্যাটিক জোন। এতক্ষণ আমাদের সাথে থাকার জন্য ধন্যবাদ সবাইকে।